This podcast serves Middle Tennessee every weekday morning, and it's made possible by member support. Learn how you can make a difference at WPLN.org/support.
This is the Nash Villager Podcast. It's February 6, 2026. It's now been more than a week and a half since roughly half of Nashville lost electricity, and thousands of people either only just got it back or are still waiting. In that time, folks have started to question a lot of things about our electric grid that you may have either not noticed before or noticed but then moved on instead of digging in deeper. And one question that I've heard recently from people who moved here from certain other parts of the country might be confusing to a lot of Southerners. Why does Nashville only have the one electric utility? Why are we all depending on NES to fix this problem? I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with context from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. In Tennessee and most of the Southeast, local monopolies are still the standard for electric utilities. But it's not like that everywhere. In Ohio, for example, people shop around for power providers. They might choose to be serviced by Duke Energy Ohio, Ohio Edison, or American Electric Power. Different companies offer varying rates and different add-on services. It's similar to how we have multiple companies here offering internet or mobile phone plans, except for electricity. The way things are here now used to be the norm all over the United States, and there's a reason why monopolies developed as the prevailing model in the mid-20th century. And Nashville is actually a good case to show the reasons why. When our city first started to electrify in the late 1800s, the thing that really drove the spread of that technology wasn't electric lighting or powering homes so we could plug in appliances. It was transportation. As developers built neighborhoods that expanded the city out from its walkable core, they also built streetcar lines to get people between those new neighborhoods and the city center. A patchwork of independent companies sprang up to run those streetcars. Some of them were using mule-drawn cars, but others were stringing up electric wires and finding power sources to operate fancy, newfangled electric streetcars. And since they were building that infrastructure for the transit, they figured they might as well offer power to anyone in those neighborhoods who was adventurous enough to want electricity in their homes, too. So for a little while, there were a handful of streetcar/electric companies operating in Nashville. But they weren't all made equal. The city definitely found problems with the streetcar aspect of some of those companies, especially when it came to how the tracks and the streets around them were maintained. There started to be talk of the city taking over some aspects of what those companies did. There were difficult conversations about rights of way, disagreements between the varied companies about sharing space on the roads in the areas where their territories and routes crossed or overlapped. It was getting really complicated. And then in 1893, there was a financial crisis. The local economy couldn't support that much variety in electric streetcar companies. And goodness knows the system could use streamlining and simplification anyway. So in 1899 and 1900, a series of deals were struck that consolidated the several independent companies into one with a man named Percy Warner at the helm. And with that, Nashville had a single streetcar company, and by extension, a single electric provider. A few years later, it took on a name that reflected the growing importance of the power offerings, Nashville Railway and Light. Over the next couple of decades, the streetcar business continued to be Nashville Railway and Light's main product, but demand for electricity just kept growing. Warner did a lot to advance the electrification of Nashville. He was very active in regional and national efforts to grow the power industry. And through that time, the same kind of consolidation that had happened locally in Nashville happened on a larger level. One big step happened in 1922 when 45 local electric companies merged to form the Tennessee Electric Power Company, or TEPCO. That combined institutions from Chattanooga all the way up to Nashville. At first, Nashville Railway and Light was kind of part in, part out. It was technically a part of TEPCO, but maintained an independent brand identity. By that point, power companies were offering way more than simple connections as an add-on to a streetcar service. And operating as TEPCO instead of a bunch of little firms made it easier to scale up when it came to helping their customers set up powered water pumps, electric farm equipment, or the latest technology for factories. The company made its own power, and it distributed that power directly to its customers. And like I said before, this move towards having one big electric provider happened everywhere in the United States. Ironically, at a time when this nation made its first steps towards busting monopolies in most other industries. But economics and policymakers decided that utilities were an exception to the rule. The idea was that with something like electricity, the only real way to offer efficiency was to have one streamlined provider in any given place. States did create rules and agencies, which had some effect of keeping those monopolies in check, at least to some degree. In Tennessee, we have the Public Utilities Commission. But something unusual did happen here in the 1930s as part of President Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal. Even with the many small electric companies across the state that had consolidated into large utilities like TEPCO, a lot of people in Tennessee still lived in places with no access to electricity. There was still way more opportunity for harnessing the power of our rivers than anyone was using. And of course, the nation was in a depression, and FDR was looking for any and every way to stimulate the economy. So he created the TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority. It was, and still is, a massive power-producing entity that's not directly run by the government exactly, but that is a public utility. It was given the task of making electricity for communities in the Tennessee River's watershed, roughly speaking, in Tennessee and parts of 7 other states. The establishment of the TVA didn't automatically replace TEPCO, but the public and private utilities were immediately at odds. One of the reasons TVA was created was because the for-profits like TEPCO hadn't seen any financial reason to extend their reach into the rural areas. That wasn't deemed cost-efficient or profitable. TVA, on the other hand, was founded with the stated goal of running electricity everywhere. Electric cooperatives started to spring up in smaller communities. Those were organizations founded to create distribution lines for TVA power. But then TEPCO started to see the co-ops as a threat. TEPCO started to see TVA as unfair competition. TVA's leaders started to see TEPCO as an impediment rather than a partner. Things got very messy. And this was happening all over the area serviced by TVA, with other regional utilities like TEPCO. It all boiled over into a complicated lawsuit that challenged the very existence of the TVA. In 1939, the Supreme Court ruled in TVA's favor, and soon after, TVA bought all of TEPCO's assets. But TVA didn't want to directly distribute power to homes and businesses. So here in Nashville, where there wasn't an electric co-op in place, the city contributed money to help TVA spin off that portion of TEPCO into a local utility. Essentially, a new version of the old Nashville Railway and Light Company. That new utility was named the Nashville Electric Service. And instead of being a private company, like the one Percy Warner ran back in the day, it was set up on the same administrative model as the TVA, just on a local level. It's a public utility, and the board that governs it is appointed by the local government. But the utility itself isn't directly run by Metro. For the most part, on the broad strokes anyway, that's how things have been here ever since. If you live in Nashville or one of the slivers of neighboring counties that are lumped into the city's utility district, you have one option for electricity: to buy power made by TVA and distributed by NES. In just a few minutes, how Nashville's Kurds are reacting to what's going on in their homeland. That's coming up after the newscast.
Best journalism in the nation. That's an apt description for a lot of what you hear on WPLN News. The proof this spring is in the array of journalism awards coming in. The Supermajority podcast won 3 national contests. Our investigative reporting, partnered with ProPublica, was named some of the best education coverage in the country. And for arts and culture, This Is Nashville and our music journalism are being honored on the national stage. We're proud, and you can be too.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. Tensions and emotions remain high for those still in the dark nearly 2 weeks after Winter Storm Fern, and for those in charge of turning the lights back on. Rita Roberts-Turner is the former chief of staff to Mayor Carl Dean. She has firsthand experience navigating moments like these. She told This Is Nashville host Blake Farmer that NES line crews are also facing intense pressure.
I do want us to acknowledge the great work that the people have been doing. These linemen are out here 15, 16-hour days, and I think it's easy to forget that they have families also. So in the middle of all the political talk, in the middle of all the emotions, let's not forget the human beings who who are doing the work, who will continue to be out there, who are getting things done.
You can hear more from Robert Turner, along with Tennessee Lookout columnist Bruce Berry and WPLN reporter Cindy Abrams in the This Is Nashville podcast feed. Meanwhile, at the time of this recording, the NES outage map now shows just under 670 power outages. The statewide number has also dropped under 1,000, with a total of 840 Tennessee households and businesses without power. The hotline for calling in storm-related wellness checks will end operation today, as will the state's winter storm information line. The Tennessee Emergency Management Agency is still asking people to self-report storm damage to the agency. And if you experience price gouging or scams from people purporting to offer storm recovery services, that should be reported to the state attorney general's office. Well, potholes are in Nashville's future. Potholes are created when rainwater gets under a road surface and then freezes. The freezing cracks and lifts the pavement, causing the pothole. Nashville's Department of Transportation Deputy Director Philip Jones says the city is expecting a lot of potholes coming with the thaw.
I do expect pothole numbers to grow. We're ramped up and ready. We've got extra crews on standby to be able to respond to any demand that happens over the next few days.
Jones says NDOT will have 4 to 8 crews filling out potholes in the next few days. If you see one, you can report it on the Hub Nashville app. Landlords in Davidson County are being asked to show compassion and leniency to tenants still recovering from the recent winter storm. Some went many days without power or water, living in temporary housing or shelters. The nonprofit Legal Aid Society says that the disruptions were far worse than expected, and renters are often vulnerable following disasters. Legal Aid of Middle Tennessee and the Cumberlands are asking landlords not to evict tenants who are late on payments until at least March 1st. They also ask landlords to hold off on late fees. The group says that as of yesterday, landlords had already filed more than 450 eviction lawsuits since a state of emergency was declared. The storm hit just as rent for February was due. Legal Aid says tenants used their rent money to cover hotel bills or replace food that went bad during the outages. Tenants in Tennessee have certain rights regarding maintenance, safety, and being free from discrimination, but nothing is in the law regarding rights during or after a weather disaster. Meanwhile, the Tennessee Titans are donating $500,000 to help folks behind on their rent because of the storm. The money will go into an emergency winter housing assistance program that the team hopes will help ease the burden for affected residents. U.S. Senator Marsha Blackburn is accused of violating federal and state campaign finance laws. The complaint comes from Republican activist Gary Lowe of Knoxville. He tells News Channel 5 he got suspicious at the end of 2024 when Blackburn used money from her U.S. Senate campaign for a Christmas commercial. He says this was just before Blackburn announced her campaign for governor. Lowe says the senator deliberately flaunted rules to keep money from federal campaigns from being used for a state run. His complaint was made with a state agency that oversees campaign fundraising and spending. Blackburn's team calls the allegations frivolous and wrong. Her campaign manager says it's a misunderstanding of federal and state campaign finance laws. Lowe insists that his complaint be evaluated by an independent state agency. He says he's not donated money or committed to backing any of the gubernatorial candidates. Congressman John Rose and State Representative Monty Fritz are running against Blackburn in the Republican primary. The United Auto Workers secured a tentative first contract with Volkswagen's assembly plant in Chattanooga on Wednesday night. It's a milestone for Southern efforts to unionize in the auto industry. The plant produces the all-electric ID4, the Atlas, and Atlas Cross Sport. The deal includes a 20% across-the-board wage increase, affordable health care provisions, and more job security. The contract will be voted on by members. If approved, there will be a $6,500 bonus, plus annual bonuses of more than $2,500. The workers voted overwhelmingly to join the union almost 2 years ago, making it the UAW's first foreign-owned plant in the South to organize. A former University of Tennessee professor spent years communicating with disgraced financier and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein about artificial intelligence research. That's according to the latest release of files from the U.S. Department of Justice. WUOT's Pierce Gentry has reviewed the files and brings us more.
According to a cache of over 200 documents released by the Department of Justice, former UT Associate Professor Itamar Arel exchanged several dozen emails with Epstein between 2009 and 2015. Most of their conversations were about Arel's research into artificial intelligence, including facial recognition technology. The documents are circulating in Knoxville community groups on social media, where students, parents, and alumni have all expressed outrage over the revelation. Beginning in 2003, Arel worked in UT's computer science department and directed its machine intelligence lab, where he taught graduate and undergraduate courses. In 2009, Arel flew to Florida and met with Epstein at his Palm Beach home, where a court ruled 1 year prior he had sexually assaulted children. By 2011, Arel was asking Epstein for money to further his research at another university, though it's unclear if that advanced. The university says the associate professor left UT in 2021. That was 2 years after Epstein's high-profile death in a New York prison. Attempts to reach Arel have been unsuccessful. I'm Pierce Gentry, WUOT News.
At least some of the records related to the Covenant School shooting should be made public, but with limitations. That's the decision of the Tennessee Court of Appeals, reversing portions of a lower court ruling. The appeals court does agree that a parent group that was given ownership of the shooter's writings has a copyright claim. The ruling suggests that may mean the records should only be available for reviewing in person at a Metro office. Also, the appeals panel acknowledged that some of what is in the records may still be part of an ongoing police investigation. The ruling says those details should be redacted, and it sends the case back to the trial court to determine which parts should become public and what should stay under wraps. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. The Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces have reached a truce with Syria's government following weeks of clashes. For more on how this is affecting Nashville's Kurdish community, WPLN's Rose Gilbert has this story.
Mehmet Ayaz lives in Nashville, but he grew up in a Kurdish village on the border between Turkey and Syria. He was born on the Turkish side, but his father's family lives in Syria, near the city of Kobani.
There is one city divided by a fake border. We during the religious holidays, people go to this border and they throw gifts across these fences.
In 2014, Kobani was attacked by the Islamic State group. Hundreds of thousands of people were forced to flee their homes, including most of Ayaz's family. His cousin Shukri died fighting against the Islamic State group as part of the U.S.-backed Kurdish forces. Since then, the Kurdish-led SDF has controlled wide swaths of Syria, including oil fields and prisons that hold Islamic State fighters and their families. Now, after weeks of fierce fighting, the Syrian army has taken that land back.
It's 2014 all over again, but this time it is worse. Way, way worse. My cousins, my uncles are on foot in this winter trying to escape town to town, village to village, not to be caught by these thugs.
For the past few weeks, Ayaz has been receiving desperate farewells from family members in Syria who are convinced they're going to die. In one video he shared with me, Syrian soldiers filmed themselves destroying a memorial photo of his late cousin Shukri. The internet's been flooded with videos of Syrian soldiers vandalizing Kurdish fighters' graves and bragging about violence targeting female Kurdish fighters. So even though this new truce should mean his family is safe, Ayaz says they don't trust it, or the Syrian government.
And the words and actions are not same. The officials are saying, integration. What they're talking about integration is destruction of Kurds. This is not integration. That's destruction.
United States envoy Tom Barrack called the new truce a profound and historic milestone in Syria's journey towards national reconciliation, unity, and enduring stability. Ayaz disagrees.
And that's beyond betrayal. I don't know what this is.
Kurdistan is not a recognized country. It's a region split across Syria, Turkey, Iraq, and Iran, which means that the Kurdish people are very literally divided by borders. And like any large group of people, there are also political, religious, and cultural differences. There have been protests in support of the Kurds in Syria and cities across the world, from Paris to Erbil to Washington, D.C. In Nashville, 3 separate and sometimes competing community organizations joined forces to host rallies and raise money for charity.
I'm hoping that USA one day can help us to have the democracy like our country, so we have a democracy for everybody in the Middle East.
That's Kayhan Ali. He was born in the city of Halabja in Iraqi Kurdistan. When he was 4 years old, the Iraqi army bombed Halabja with chemical weapons, killing thousands of Kurdish civilians, including much of Ali's family. Ali survived, but the chemicals used in the attack left him with a lasting stutter and skin issues. For him, what's happening in Syria feels personal.
Nowhere in Kurdistan are safe. nowhere. Like one day, it can just like we get attacked, and that's it. The problem is with Kurdish, we have so many like drama in our life. Like Halabja is already forgotten.
Already forgotten. That's exactly what Ayaz and his family fear will become of America's Kurdish allies in Syria. In the meantime, they're waiting to see how this new truce plays out before they feel safe enough to return to their homes. Rose Gilbert, WPLN News.
We do this roundup of Nashville news every weekday. Please consider subscribing on your favorite podcasting app. And thanks so much to all of you who've left 5 stars, a thumbs up, or a review in your app of choice. That little bit of love really does tell the algorithms that more people should hear about us. And of course, everything at WPLN News is listener supported. You can make a donation at WPLN.org. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one. And we'll catch back up next week.